What's up, guys? Jake back here with the Killing Joke Studios and Mixing with Metal. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who's checked out the videos that I put up already and everyone who's subscribed to the channel. If you haven't checked out the videos or you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that so you can get all caught up with us and you can catch any videos I put out in the future. So with that being said, I hope that what I put out has helped you and that you've been able to implement some things that I've said into your mixes and that they've made your mixes better. And I hope what I'm going to show you today will help you as well. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to be talking about sitting your vocals better in your mix. So you've seen a million videos before about making your vocals up front, and that's not what I'm going to be covering today. If you don't know how to EQ your vocals properly, if you don't know how to compress your vocals properly, add saturation, anything like that, there's plenty of videos here on YouTube to check that out. And I suggest you go and watch those because they're probably going to explain it better than I could anyway. But I'm not going to be covering that. I'm going to cover something else, and that's sitting them in your mix, because you can get that upfront vocal sound. You can get that consistent vocal sound. But how do you sit them properly with all your other instruments, especially in hard rock and metal where there's heavy distorted guitars, crazy drums, all that kind of stuff? It's hard to sit your vocals properly in your mix without being either too distant or too up front and sounding almost offensive. So let me just play this mix for you really quick. This is a band called Sleep Signals out of Minneapolis, and I'm mixing their new EP right now. Great band, great music. Make sure you check out their EP whenever it comes out. But let me just play a section for you so you can hear what's happening with these vocals in the mix. Awesome. So as you can hear, the vocals sound like they're sitting at a point that sounds natural in the mix. So how did I do that? Well, I downloaded a plugin that I saw online from Tokyo Dawn Labs. They're also the people who make the Slick EQ. So if you haven't checked out the Slick EQ, I just did a video on it. Make sure you go check out the video and download the plugin. It's completely free, as well as this one, and it's a great EQ. But Nova, this other plugin I downloaded, is not just an EQ. It's something called a dynamic EQ. So what exactly is a dynamic EQ? Basically, when I'm telling this EQ, I have it on my vocal bus. I'm telling it as more audio or more frequencies that build up in this area, or right around 700 hertz, the more frequencies that build up there, I want you to compensate for that and change the curve of the EQ. So it's almost like a self-automating EQ that automates based on how much frequency is built up there. So let me bypass that right here in the mix, and then I'll bring it back in. Let me go here in the verse so you can hear it a little bit more clearly. All right, that's out. Let's bring it back in. So if you listen to the harmonies in particular, you can hear that everything's sitting much better in the mix. And you can see visually here what was happening when more harmonies were coming in. So this singer had a very strong voice. And whenever you have a very strong voice and you're adding harmonies, and especially layering harmonies like what's happening here, then you tend to have buildup in the mid-range, some sort of mid-range area that is not really desirable and cuts into the guitars mostly in the mix. So if you listen to the guitars bypass, you can hear how these harmonies are cutting into it. And then back in. So the guitars are coming through a lot more because the EQ is compensating for these harmonies coming in. So this is one of the useful features for dynamic EQ, and it has a ton of uses. It's often confused with multi-band compression, where you have different frequency bands, and you can choose to compress different sets of frequencies separate from each other, independent from each other. While this is doing something similar, it's not doing exactly the same thing. There's not bands here, so I'm not compressing certain things. Instead, I'm changing the curve of the EQ as more audio comes in. Very similar thing, but it's a lot safer. Whenever you're using a lot of multiband compression, you can run into a lot of issues. I won't dive into it right now, but multiband compression is one of those tools that when used sparsely can be incredibly useful, but when used all the time, it can really hurt your mixes. And I think dynamic EQ is a much safer route for doing something that's very similar. So, dynamic EQ, you can also use it like on overheads, for instance. Overhead tracks, you might have, your hi-hats and they sound really great, but you have a crash that sounds really harsh and you've cut out all these whistly frequencies and you've done everything that you can with your overheads, but you just cannot get that crash to sit right. And every time you take out top end, you're taking away from things like the hi-hats. So sure, you could sit and automate the overheads, and you should probably automate the overheads a little bit, but you could just set up a band here that whenever that crash comes in or whenever the transient comes in when you hit a crash cymbal, that the EQ compensates for that. And so there's a lot of really great uses for it, and especially here with the vocals, they just immediately sit better in the mix. So if you haven't downloaded Nova or you haven't downloaded the Slick EQ, head over to their website and download these plugins now. They're available in all formats: VST, audio unit, AAX, everything that you could possibly want, and they're completely free. They do have gentleman's editions, is what they call them, which are the paid versions of the plugins that have a few more features with them. But if you can't afford that or you just want to try them out, download the free ones. If you like them, make sure you support them and actually buy the gentleman's editions of the plugins. The link will be in the description below to download them. I hope what I've shown you has helped you today. I hope you're able to put it back in your mixes and that you'll be able to sit your vocals or sit whatever better into your mixes. So make sure you leave me a comment below and let me know what you thought. Thumbs up the video and subscribe for any future videos I'll be putting out. Thanks so much, guys.